Welcome back to Switch to Linux. I'm experimenting with different lighting. I'm trying to see if I can come up with a way to keep the door open, and I'm not sure I like it yet, but hey, we'll deal with it for a short video here. I want to talk a little bit about the Pewdiepie videos. Of course, there were a couple of them. I saw the Linux cast just did a brief response to the Linux one, I think, although they might be conflating. He did a Linux one, and then a couple months later he did a Google one. The Google video is the one that just came out. And so I watched both of them today. I took some notes. I'm only going to show 3 short clips from it. I don't know if there's copyright issues or not with YouTube's former biggest. Of course, he's no longer the biggest. I know Mr. Beast, I think, has 420 million subscribers. PewDiePie has 110 million subscribers right now. But at one time, he was the largest YouTuber. And I know he's gotten frustrated a little bit with the platform over time. And honestly, I don't follow PewDiePie very much. I'm not much into the gaming, and I'm not much into just the style that he does. I realize a lot of people do, obviously. But when he comes out and does some videos that crosses over into the areas that we talk about here, I thought it was really good. Now, I didn't respond to the Linux one initially. I just kind of wanted to let other people talk about it for a little bit. But he just came out with one 2 days ago on YouTube and Google. Mostly it was about Google, although the thumbnail had YouTube in it. And so I wanted to have a look at both of these videos. You can see he doesn't post a whole lot on here anymore. He has, it looks like every couple weeks, but 2 months ago, he does a video, I install Linux, so should you. This has received 6.1 million views. And then he has a couple different things. And then 2 days ago, he does I'm done with Google with 4.4 million views. And I wanted to talk about both of these because some of the content that he gets is really good. And really, I think that where he was getting frustrated is really where I started. And what's curious is how much his journey through Linux and the enthusiasm for the free and open source technology is exactly where I personally started. It kind of started with the direction many of these businesses are going. Now, of course, I did mine over a decade ago when Windows starts releasing information on the Windows 10 system. And this is actually what he has to say.
And for me, it's not even necessarily about Google. I think it's more about big tech in general. I hate where software is going. Unnecessary subscriptions, ads, locking, updates changing the entire UI because you're more prone somehow to get more locked in.
So he gets frustrated because the businesses are coming out, and these businesses coming out are they're pushing vendor lock-ins, they're pushing advertisements, they're pushing subscription fees. There's things that we buy, and then all of a sudden you have to now pay a subscription service to continue to use it. Or we are seeing fewer and fewer options out there in order to buy products. Finding basic products without tied subscription services is getting a lot harder. And so now that was actually from his second video, but his first video on Linux was for the most part excellent. And in this, really he installs Linux, then he gets that taste for that open source software that brings back the enthusiasm. And I echo that same thing because when I first switched to Linux, I all of a sudden got the enthusiasm for adjusting my computer again, doing basic things he talked about in his video. I got the enthusiasm once again for watching movies. So the amount of movies that I've bought since switching to Linux is absolutely staggering because it was pleasurable to watch movies again. And so, you know, in Hollywood, I buy movies when you sell them on DVD, you know. I'm not buying your streaming services, deal with it, you know. But I want to talk briefly about his very first video. And he outlined 4 reasons in that video why he wanted to switch to Linux, or at least things that frustrated him about Windows. They were kind of merged together. The first is he did not like that Windows talks to him like a baby, trying to make his decisions, trying to verify that he really wants to do something. Obviously, if you delete a file, I'm not opposed to a, hey, are you really sure you want to delete this? You could accidentally hit that delete button, and you'd rather not lose something permanently if that happens. So the fact there's a recycling bin is good. The fact there's confirmations you're deleting something is good. But Windows goes in many cases too far with many of those things, and he gets into it with the antithesis of this in Linux is that you have a whole lot more control over your system. Linux basically says, yes, these are the things that are available for you to do. Or would you like to do them? And that's what he is talking about. The second area he talks about in his video is bloat. And Windows, of course, has all sorts of bloat. He talks about the meme of Candy Crush being pushed on you. And when you uninstall Candy Crush, it reinstalls itself for the next patch Tuesday. And you just can't get rid of that zombie video game that simply wastes all of your time. And for a professional system, why are we having video games being dropped onto professional business systems? And he really liked the fact that most Linux systems do not have a lot of bloat. Now, what does bloat mean? That is a moving target. You do something like Ubuntu has a full install, which doesn't even have a ton of stuff. It's just Office Doc, Office Suite, and a few software applications versus the minimal, which has effectively nothing but basic utilities and a web browser. Although some people look at the basic utilities and say that's bloat. And so what is it? Now he talks in his video about switching Arch on his laptop, and he talks a little bit about Linux Mint. And so he does talk about these in terms of not having bloat, and it appears as though he is defining bloat as the games like Candy Crush, although some Linux distributions install games, it doesn't have all this AI stuff all over. It doesn't have all of these things pushed upon you that you may not like. So he talks about that. His third reason for switching over there was on Linux, you can customize everything to the nth degree. And really, he shows us his Arch computer. I'd absolutely encourage you. This is one of the reasons I'm not pulling out a lot of clips. I want you to go watch those videos. Even if PewDiePie's not your thing, he's not my thing. And I was fascinated by these two videos. I really enjoyed them. I don't know. Maybe I'll sub to PewDiePie. I don't know. Probably not. But still, I love the direction that he is going with these two videos. And then, of course, he talks forth about gaming, that gaming is now properly working with Linux. We can thank Valve and for this with Proton and the Steam Deck and things like that. Of course, watch his second video to see the amazing things he did with his Steam Deck. I want you to watch it. I'm not going to tell you about it. He does get into, there's some reasons why not, but that really turned into a reason why. He's like, the only draw for him for Windows was his Adobe account. And then he's like, but I made GIMP work just like Photoshop. And then he's frustrated that Adobe, on top of having only a subscription model, now he even has a fee to cancel your subscription model. Think of that. You buy a software package, you're paying for it, and you say, I no longer want to pay for this subscription package, and they charge you to cancel the subscription package. What type of world are we living in that that's even legal? But that is indeed what is going on in that. So his why not turned into a really, really huge why. Now, what I did not like about his video is that he didn't actually give us good, easy ways to test it out. This is actually what he says, and this is not the way I recommend it, but this is what he says.
Now, if you're even just a little bit curious, I recommend trying Linux. Maybe try dual booting it if you're not sure. You can still keep your Windows or whatever. You're gonna kill it later. You might as well kill it now.
All right. So to his point, he's probably preferring kind of that cold turkey. Let's just jump right on in. I've never been a huge advocate for that because there's a little bit of learning curve for the average person. And so with such a learning curve like that for the average person, then what's probably better, as I recommend, is you can either do a external USB drive, you can do something as simple as a little flash drive, a flash USB drive. You can try virtualization, and you could just buy a cheap throwaway computer, and there's going to be a lot hitting the market soon, by the way. To test out and get used to Linux, I also recommend looking at the software you're using, go to Alternative 2, and then when you're over there, look for the software that you're using. You may find that a lot of the software you're using is already available for Linux. And so getting into this is nice and easy to test. Now, here's the fundamental problem with dual booting is when you're putting two operating systems on a drive, it will work initially, but if any one of those wants to update, more or less if Windows wants to update the boot partition, it will completely wipe out your Linux install. Now, you can get it back. It basically knocks out the custom bootloader that Linux installs, and Windows does not oftentimes like you to booting into Linux. And so it would be like, hey, there's a Linux here, get rid of it quick. And so that's why I don't recommend the dual booting. Additionally, having two operating systems on the same hard drive can cause some other incompatibility issues. It's a good way to lose both operating systems. And so I'm not a huge fan of that method. But the encouragement to switch is definitely good and sound advice. That being the only thing in either of these two videos I looked at and said, wow, yeah, I wouldn't do that. But the point is still sound. Now, once he's played around with Linux, he experienced the same thing that I experienced. And he starts out his second video with this.
I realized since swapping to Linux, my life has just been going upwards. I'm practically ascending next step. But I realized there's always an open source alternative, and a lot of times they're better. They just don't have a $1 billion budget to market themselves.
All right, so what he says here is really true. There are a lot of really good alternatives to all the different software you're using. They just don't have the budgets that you have. What is the difference between a highly successful movie in Hollywood and a flop in Hollywood? It has nothing to do with how good the movie is. It has entirely to do with how much they market the movie. In every case, that seems to be the situation. I guess there's a few more modern situations where some of the focus, the direction, or the messaging of the movie has caused some people to go, I just don't want to go see that. I don't want my kids to go see that. I can understand that as well in some cases. But for the most part, classically, if a movie underperforms, more often than not, it is because of the marketing budget. Look at one good example is The Shawshank Redemption is the highest rated movie on almost every movie platform. It is a phenomenal, fascinating movie. Everybody loves it, but it totally flopped in the box office because they simply didn't market it enough. And that's really the point he gets at with his second video is there's a lot of alternatives he has, and he actually mentioned some alternatives in here I have never even heard of. I'm gonna do some searching. So he does talk in his second video about his two major reasons why he wanted to de-Google his life, and now we're talking about the video he just did, I am done with Google. So I encourage you to, let me jump back over there. So this one here, I am done with Google, 4.4 million views in 2 days. If only I could get that money, right? But over there, he talks about his two primary reasons. The first is the privacy concerns, and the second is, which he expands on through the rest of the video, is a lot of control over software. I think he was probably doing his bullet list a little differently than I was doing mine as I was taking the notes through, because I put two major bullet points and I put subpoints under that, and he talked about varying levels of the software that he had here. And so he's talking first and foremost, change that search engine. Do it now. Super easy. You don't have to change anything. Just change that search engine. Go to something a little bit more privacy focused than the default, which is probably Google. You know, you don't realize, but when you just go up to that address bar and type something in, it's set to automatically go Google. Some people may not even realize you can go right into the settings and change that. Super simple. Changing that, of course, changing the browser. He talks about that. He is using, I think, Firefox. He mentions a few other ones. He mentions Brave, although says he's never tried it before. I personally have always recommended a cornucopia of web browsers, so I do not use just one. I actually have roughly 4 to 5 web browsers installed on every single computer, and different web browsers have different purposes. He then talks about email platforms. He talks briefly about Proton Mail, but ultimately he chose to go with what I do, self-hosting your email, which can be as simple as going on to like one of the affiliates we have, like A2 Hosting, buy a domain name, and right inside of cPanel, you click the button to create an email address. That is how simple it is. And you can do that. Now, you can use Proton Mail with a custom domain if you don't want to do that, and that could potentially be a little bit cheaper in the long run, depending on which plans you're getting on which services. But it just depends. Do you want somebody else to run that, or do you want to have the full control over the background? I like the full control. That's why I self-host. He then gets into the phone. He's using a Pixel 9, and he talks about using Graphene OS on it. That's the same phone that I use on mine. That he doesn't mention a lot of other ROMs. He just says there's other ones. He says he uses Graphene OS. There are a number of other ones. I prefer Graphene OS, having used it for a while. I like Lineage better in a few instances, a few cases, but overall I've been very happy with Graphene OS, and so I'm sticking with that. He does mention Password Manager. He's using Vault Warden. I've never actually heard of Vault Warden, but it is one of the internet hosted ones, and I tend to not do things with internet hosted password managers. I prefer the model of using KeePass XC, and then I just, once a month reconcile all password changes, adjustments, sync that to a local file, and then distribute that to all of the devices that need that file, because I just don't want my passwords on the internet at all. So no matter what. He says that really he started the video, in fact, talking about the one thing that caused him to really investigate this is Google Drive. And he's like, Google Drive was costing, was it $20 a month or something for the storage? Or I forget exactly what the numbers he was. And he goes and uses File Browser for that. That's another one I've not directly heard of, mostly because I have been using Nextcloud, which he says he is using now for his contacts and calendars, although he could also use that as the Google Drive replacement as well. He didn't mention that specifically, but he does say the Nextcloud is overall full front. So ultimately, though, looking at having watched both of the PewDiePie videos, I think that is this going to cause a major positive in the Linux community? I think he's going to attract a lot of younger people. You've got to remember his target audience, or at least the people watching his videos, are typically those that are in their young adults at this point in time. When I was mentoring the kids from roughly the 2010s, those kids I was mentoring, they were like 10, 12 years old around that time. They are now, adults. They're now 25, 30 years old. Those are the ones that are still much more familiar with PewDiePie. They're probably still watching his content. And that is actually the exact generation right now we're moving into it, especially since younger people are a lot more concerned with privacy. And this is moving more people into the idea of getting the privacy going. And so ultimately, I think this is an awesome thing. I think he's doing a great job, and just how he's installing Linux, the way he's testing it out, the way he's presenting it, are all really good. Now, is everyone going to jump over? Obviously, his whole audience, 4 million people watched the video on Google, 6 million people watch the video on Linux. Does that mean 6 million new users are going to jump over? No, roughly 10% of the people who watch it might give it some serious thought. Roughly 5% will probably install it, and probably about 10% of those will probably think about staying on Linux. So if you drill the numbers down, he's very possibly getting tens to hundreds of thousands of people to at least test Linux, if not completely install it. And that's actually really good for the numbers. That's really good for the FOSS software. And that's really good for that ascending feeling where you install Linux on a computer. And I'm talking about, I installed Linux from the Windows 7 leading into the Windows 10 era, and that was a breath of fresh air. I can only imagine what somebody would feel who is stuck, locked into the Windows ecosystem right now, installs Linux. The breath of fresh air would be so incredible that we could potentially see a bigger boost. So it'll be curious to watch the desktop statistics in a month or two, see if there has been any bump at all, and then speculate how much of this is PewDiePie discussing these issues. So I'm going to link both of these videos down below. I encourage you to go watch both of these videos, because both of these have excellent things, total of about 40-45 minutes of content, and it is all excellent, excellent stuff. So there are my thoughts about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you also, like PewDiePie, enjoy switching to Linux.